First day, first target. 12-year-old Elijah Brooks clutched his backpack straps tightly as he walked through the tall iron gates of Westbridge Conservatory School for the Performing Arts. The sun was still climbing, the fall breeze nipping gently at his cheeks. His mother's words echoed in his ears. "Keep your chin up, baby. Let your music speak louder than anyone's hate ever could." He'd transferred here on a full scholarship. His talent on the piano had caught the attention of the city's Arts Foundation, and they'd pushed for his enrollment in one of the most prestigious schools in the state. But Elijah didn't care about status. He just wanted to play. Westbridge was nothing like his old school in the South End. Here, the buildings had grand columns, oak-paneled hallways, and glass trophies lined in perfect rows. The students, in their ironed uniforms and polished shoes, didn't look like him. Barely anyone did. As he walked through the halls, students stared, some out of curiosity, others with unmasked suspicion. A few whispered. Elijah ignored them and followed the signs to room 104, Advanced Music Theory and Practice. He took a deep breath and stepped in. At the grand piano near the whiteboard stood a woman in a pearl gray blazer and stiff black skirt. She scribbled something in chalk, then turned sharply. "Elijah Brooks?" she asked, eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice steady. "I'm Miss Denholm. Take the last seat by the window." Elijah nodded and walked past the rows of students, all of whom paused to watch him. Whispers followed. Someone snickered. Another boy muttered, "Wrong school, dude." He sat down, pulling his notebook from his bag, eyes focused forward. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him bothered. Miss Denholm began her lecture on Mozart's sonatas, her clipped British accent slicing through the air. The class was silent. Elijah followed along, jotting notes quickly. He loved this part. The theory, the history, the mechanics behind the music. It grounded him. But Miss Denholm kept glancing at him, and every time she did, her voice would pause for just a beat, as if trying to decide how much patience she owed him. By the end of class, she stood beside the piano and tapped a sheet of music. "We'll begin with individual demonstrations today," she said crisply. "Let's see who has been practicing. Elijah, why don't you go first?" A ripple of laughter moved through the class. Elijah stiffened. He stood anyway. "Do you need a simpler piece?" Miss Denholm asked, her voice light but laced with implication. "No, ma'am," Elijah replied. He approached the piano, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't what he wanted on his first day, to be tested, displayed. But he'd been through worse. He sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands gently on the keys. The piece was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of his favorites. He didn't hesitate. As his fingers moved, the classroom faded away. Every note flowed like water, smooth and delicate. The students' chatter died. Even Miss Denholm didn't move. The melancholy beauty of the nocturne filled the room like a hush falling over a storm. When he reached the final note, the silence that followed was louder than applause. Then someone said, "Holy crap." A few students clapped, then more. A boy in the front gave him a slow nod. Elijah stood slowly. Miss Denholm's face was unreadable. "That will do," she said shortly. "Take your seat." He did. The next student approached, and the lesson continued. But the atmosphere had shifted. Students whispered differently now. A few looked at him with something closer to awe, but Miss Denholm didn't look pleased. After class, Elijah grabbed his bag. He felt a tap on his shoulder. It was a girl with tight curls and curious eyes. "That was amazing," she said. "I'm Nia. You play like better than anyone here." Elijah smiled, shy but thankful. "Thanks." Nia leaned closer. "Just a heads up, Miss Denholm. She doesn't like people proving her wrong." "I noticed," Elijah said quietly. They walked to the next class together. But Elijah knew the moment wasn't over. Miss Denholm's look wasn't just one of surprise. It was a challenge. And this was only the beginning. The glare behind the smile. The following morning, Elijah arrived early. The practice rooms were empty at that hour. Just the soft hum of the janitor's radio echoing through the polished halls. He found the small studio marked Practice Room 3 and quietly slipped inside. He placed his fingers on the keys of the upright piano, closed his eyes, and began to play a medley of jazz chords. His own composition, one he'd never played for anyone. The syncopation danced between his hands, full of freedom and rhythm. Music, to Elijah, wasn't just notes, it was breathing. But even as he played, he couldn't shake Miss Denholm's expression from yesterday. Her face hadn't shown anger or embarrassment, it showed calculation. At 9 a.m. sharp, Elijah took his seat in room 104. As the rest of the students filed in, a hush settled. Nia gave him a small wave. A boy named Marcus, who had smirked at him on day one, offered a thin smile today. Miss Denholm entered last, her heels clacking with precision. She placed her leather binder on the piano and scanned the room. "I trust you've all reflected on yesterday's impromptu recital," she began, her tone syrupy with an edge. "Today, we're moving on to Beethoven's Sonata No. 14. You may know it by its more theatrical name, Moonlight Sonata." She wrote the piece on the board in bold strokes. "Before we begin," she said, turning slowly, "Mr. Brooks, since you were so keen to impress us yesterday, would you care to demonstrate the opening movement?" A few students exchanged glances. Elijah blinked. "Yes, ma'am." He rose, calm on the outside, but on the inside, something felt off. Miss Denholm had set him up. This wasn't just a performance request, it was a trap. He sat at the piano and looked at the sheet she handed him. The notations were correct, but they were written in an outdated German style, one used in some European conservatories. Most students would trip over it unless they'd studied it specifically. She was testing him. He stared at the sheet for a moment longer, letting the silence settle over the class. Then he pushed the sheet aside. "I'll play from memory," he said softly. And he began. The haunting opening notes of the Moonlight Sonata echoed through the room, delicate and slow like ripples across a dark lake. His touch was controlled, precise, but not mechanical. He let the emotion of the music speak through him. As he reached the final lingering note, the class sat breathless again. This time, no applause came. Just stunned silence. Miss Denholm's jaw clenched ever so slightly. "Sit down, Elijah," she said, her voice brittle. He nodded and returned to his seat. After class, she pulled him aside. "You're self-taught, I assume?" Elijah met her gaze. "Mostly. My mom taught me a lot when I was little. I've had some community instructors, too." Miss Denholm's lips thinned. "We follow a very strict curriculum here. You may find improvisation and emotion are not substitutes for discipline." Elijah tilted his head. "Is that what you think that was? Improvisation?" Her nostrils flared, but she said nothing more. He walked out of the room without waiting for dismissal. Later that afternoon, during lunch, Elijah sat alone beneath a tree outside the cafeteria. The others had started to treat him like an anomaly, admiration mingled with unease. No one was openly hostile, but they weren't inviting either. Except for Nia. She plopped beside him, offering half her sandwich. "You destroyed that Moonlight Sonata. I think I saw Marcus nearly cry." Elijah smiled faintly. Miss Denholm looked like she swallowed a lemon. "She's always been like that," Nia whispered. "But she's worse with certain people." He looked up at her. "You mean people who look like me?" Nia nodded, lips pressed together. "She makes it sound polite, professional, but it's there." Elijah's expression hardened. "I'm not here to fight her." "No," Nia agreed. "But she just declared war on you." That evening Elijah came home exhausted. His mom, Yolanda, was at the stove making cornbread and greens. The house smelled like Sunday. "You okay, baby?" He dropped his bag and nodded. "Yeah, just tired." "You still playing your heart out?" "I think that's what's got me in trouble." She turned off the burner and walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. Elijah, you were born with music in your bones. If someone doesn't like that, that's their problem, not yours. He looked at her for a moment. What if they try to break me down for it? She leaned in and kissed his forehead. They'll fail, because they don't know who they're dealing with. But Miss Denholm wasn't finished, and by the time Friday rolled around she had something else planned. Something public, something humiliating. A performance setup. Friday morning dawned with a strange heaviness. Clouds hovered low in the sky like they were unsure whether to rain or wait. Elijah walked to school with his headphones in, but no music playing, just silence. He needed his thoughts to stay clear. As soon as he entered the music room, he noticed something was off. Miss Denholm stood near the grand piano with a fresh stack of sheet music in her hands. A poster had been taped to the whiteboard in bold print. Westbridge Fall Assembly. Live showcase today at 11 a.m. The other students buzzed with excitement. A few were rehearsing scales. Nia caught Elijah's eye from across the room and raised an eyebrow. He shrugged, not knowing what was coming. Miss Denholm clapped her hands sharply. Class, today is our opportunity to represent this conservatory at the school-wide assembly. The board and several guests will be attending, including donors and the media team. I've chosen a few of you to perform solo pieces. The students leaned in. She looked directly at Elijah. Elijah Brooks, you'll be representing the advanced piano division. A stunned hush followed her words. Elijah blinked. I wasn't told. No, she cut in. Because I wanted to see if you could truly perform under pressure. You seem to thrive on surprises after all. He stared at her. You'll play this, she said, handing him a sheet. It was a medley. Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and a jazz interlude wedged unnaturally in the middle. It was clearly designed to be disjointed, difficult, and near impossible to master in an hour. This piece, she added, is unorthodox. But I'm told your background might suit it. Someone chuckled from the back of the class. Another whispered, Damn. Elijah's jaw tightened. I'd prefer to play something I know. This is a conservatory, Mr. Brooks, she said sweetly. Adaptability is part of the education. He said nothing, just took the sheet. Nia came to his side as the others filtered out for break. She's setting you up to bomb. That medley's a mess. Elijah nodded. She wants to humiliate me in front of the school. Can you improvise it, rework it? I'd have to rewrite half of it and memorize it in under an hour. Then do it. Elijah looked at the old grand piano. He could feel its weight like a dare. He sat down, laid the sheet beside him, and began softly testing the chords. First Chopin, then Rachmaninoff, then jazz. It was like putting ketchup on caviar. But slowly, methodically, Elijah began to make sense of it. He restructured the transitions, introduced smoother cadences, and reshaped it all into something that sounded, just barely, like one voice. By 11 a.m., the auditorium was full. Teachers, students, donors, camera crews. A spotlight glared at the stage where a series of student performances unfolded. Ballet, violin, vocals. Then, Miss Denholm stepped to the mic. Our final soloist is one of our new students, she said, a trace of condescension curling her tone. He will be performing a complex cross-genre piano medley to showcase his range. Please welcome Elijah Brooks. A hesitant clap. Elijah stepped onto the stage, heartbeat like a drum inside his chest. He sat, exhaled once, and placed his fingers on the keys. And then he began. The Chopin opened the piece, a slow, mournful melody that drew in the silence of the crowd. He let it breathe, stretching the notes like silk. Then came the transition, a risky modulation he'd invented just this morning. Seamlessly, it shifted into Rachmaninoff's thunderous arpeggios, building into a storm. His fingers blurred. People sat straighter. And just as the tension peaked, he spun it into a rolling jazz phrase. Smooth, playful, unexpected. Someone in the audience gasped. He smiled, not at them, but at the music itself. He ended with a flourish, pulling the disjointed chaos into a single perfect resolve. The final chord rang out, full and earned. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered through the auditorium. Students rose. A donor even stood, clapping with both hands high. From the wings, Miss Denholm remained frozen. Backstage, Elijah stepped off the platform, wiping sweat from his forehead. Nia ran to him, eyes wide with disbelief. "You rewrote it on the spot?" He nodded, still breathless. "I wasn't going to let her own my story." Behind them, a teacher from another department approached. "You've got a gift, son," he said warmly. "We'll be talking about that performance for a long time." Elijah managed a quiet, "Thank you." That evening, Miss Denholm handed out weekend assignments in class like nothing had happened. She barely acknowledged Elijah's performance. But as he left the room, she said in a clipped voice, "Don't get used to applause. One good performance doesn't prove consistency." Elijah turned back to her and met her eyes. "No," he said, "but it proves I belong here." He walked away before she could respond. And this time, more than one student followed. The notes they didn't see coming. Elijah woke up on Saturday morning to a flood of notifications on his phone. His inbox was filled with links, screenshots, and congratulations. Nia had uploaded a short clip from the assembly performance to social media, captioned, "They tried to set him up. He flipped the whole script. Elijah Brooks, shock your piano prodigy." By sunrise, it had gone viral. The clip, just 40 seconds, showed Elijah's seamless transition from Rachmaninoff to jazz. The comments exploded. "Who is this kid? He's not playing music, he is music." That teacher thought she was setting him up. Lamau. Black excellence, period. Elijah stared at the screen, overwhelmed. His mom peeked in from the hallway, holding her coffee. "You okay?" He held up the phone. It blew up. She smiled softly. "Of course it did. You lit it on fire." By Monday, the atmosphere at Westbridge had shifted. Students who used to ignore Elijah now greeted him in the halls. A boy from the vocal department asked if they could collaborate. Someone invited him to lunch. Even Marcus, once smug and dismissive, nodded in respect. But the biggest shift was in Miss Denholm. She no longer spoke directly to Elijah in class. If she addressed him at all, it was clipped, formal. Her eyes betrayed something deeper. Conflict, maybe even resentment. She was losing control of the narrative. One morning, she entered class with a thin smile. "Students, the conservatory has decided to host a winter recital featuring our top pupils. Auditions begin next week." She looked directly at Elijah now. "I suggest those of you riding a wave of online popularity remember, technique and theory win recitals, not theatrics." Elijah said nothing. He didn't need to. But Nia leaned over and whispered, "She's rattled." That afternoon, Elijah was called into the office of Mr. Latimer, the director of the music department. A tall, soft-spoken man in his 50s with thick glasses and a piano tie, Latimer was known for rarely giving praise. "Elijah," he said as the boy entered, "have a seat." Elijah sat, unsure what this was about. "I watched the recording of your assembly performance. Your handling of that medley was remarkable. You displayed not only technical command, but also composition-level insight." "Thank you, sir," Elijah said cautiously. Latimer folded his hands. "It came to our attention that the arrangement you performed was not the one originally assigned. Is that correct?" Elijah nodded. "I rewrote it. The original transitions were unstable." Latimer smiled faintly. "A professional composer might have said the same. Miss Denholm can be overly rigid." There was a pause. "Elijah, have you ever considered applying for early placement into the Youth Composers program at Juilliard?" The words landed like a thunderclap. Elijah blinked. "What?" "You'd need to audition by January. I can help prepare you. It would be a challenge. But your performance proved you're ready for more than high school curriculum." Elijah sat stunned. "Yes, I mean, yes, I'd love to try. Latimer nodded. Then we begin this week. After the meeting, Elijah rushed outside and called his mother from the courtyard. Her voice cracked when he told her. Juilliard, baby? Yeah. Mr. Latimer said he'd guide me. Oh, Elijah, your father would be so proud. Elijah swallowed hard. I wish he could see this. He does, she whispered. He does. That night, Elijah stayed after school in practice room 3. Nia brought snacks and sat cross-legged nearby as he worked through scales, theory drills, and new compositions. He closed his eyes and let his fingers speak in ways words never could. After an hour, he stopped, exhaled, and looked at her. I'm scared. She tilted her head. Of what? What if I don't make it? What if all this, the clip, the applause, even the Juilliard offer, what if it's just a moment? Nia smiled. Then make it a movement. He stared at her, then burst out laughing. You sound like you're narrating a movie trailer. She grinned. Maybe I am. Elijah Brooks, the boy who turned keys into comebacks. As the week passed, Miss Denholm grew colder. She assigned Elijah extra exercises, critiqued his fingering, questioned his tempo. But no matter what she threw at him, he absorbed it like fuel. One day, she called him after class. You've gotten quite comfortable with the attention. He stayed quiet. Fame is fleeting, she continued. But mastery requires humility. I'm not chasing fame, Elijah said. I'm chasing truth, through music. For the first time, Miss Denholm hesitated. He turned to leave. Elijah, she said quietly, the world will expect you to prove yourself twice over. He turned back. I already do. By the end of the week, auditions for the winter recital began. Elijah signed up last. Everyone knew who the final act would be. Everyone also knew. He wasn't walking in to impress them. He was walking in to show them the sound of survival. The audition that changed everything. The auditorium was dimmed except for the harsh spotlight angled toward the grand piano at center stage. The whispers of earlier performers echoed faintly behind the closed curtain as Elijah waited backstage, fingers twitching with nervous energy. The audition committee sat in the front row. Mr. Latimer, 2 visiting music scholars from a nearby college, and Miss Denholm. She sat stiffly, arms folded, her expression unreadable. Elijah Brooks? Mr. Latimer called gently from the front. Elijah exhaled slowly, adjusted his collar, and stepped into the light. The silence in the room deepened. This was it. He took his seat at the bench. The polished wood was cold under his fingers. He placed the sheet music beside him, not because he needed it, but to show he respected the process. He'd chosen something personal, a fusion piece he composed himself. It began with a classical motif, clean, elegant, and slowly built into a gospel swell with jazz undertones, reflecting his roots, his mother's church choir days, and his late father's Saturday records. As he began, the notes came soft, thoughtful. The melody was reflective, almost uncertain at first. Then it shifted, warmer harmonies, fuller chords, rolling blues licks wrapped around Chopin phrasing. The piano became a vessel for something more than sound. It told his story, his anger, his pride, his loneliness, his fight. The tempo surged, then fell, then danced with syncopated rhythm. Near the end, he incorporated a nod to the Moonlight Sonata, a deliberate gesture, and altered the final phrase with his own chords. He closed on a rich, unresolved harmony that left the room holding its breath. He lifted his hands from the keys. Silence. Then Mr. Latimer clapped once, then again, rising to his feet. The other judges followed. Even Miss Denholm blinked, visibly shaken. But she didn't clap. Instead, she wrote something in her notebook with tight, furious precision. Elijah stood, bowed his head slightly, and walked off stage without a word. Backstage, Nia rushed up and hugged him hard. Elijah, that wasn't a performance. That was a sermon. He laughed, trying to shake off the intensity still clinging to his body. You think I went too personal? No, she said. You went honest. And that scares people. 2 days later, the list of selected performers was posted on the conservatory bulletin board. A crowd gathered before it, blocking the hallway. Nia pushed through and scanned the page. Elijah, she shouted, spinning around. He pushed through the crowd, heart pounding. There it was. Headliner, Elijah Brooks, original composition. Gasps rose around him. Whispers, too. Miss Denholm had been overruled. That afternoon, Mr. Latimer found him in the practice hall. You've been selected to perform your piece as the closing act, he said. And the Arts Foundation Board wants a recorded copy. You'll be representing Westbridge at the State Youth Showcase next semester. Elijah blinked. Wait. What? Latimer smiled. They want you to perform it live. And if you're accepted into Juilliard's youth program, this will be your audition piece. Elijah didn't know what to say. You've made something undeniable, Latimer added. Not even Denholm could refute it. But denial wasn't Miss Denholm's way. That evening after class, she called Elijah into her office. He stepped inside cautiously. I suppose congratulations are in order, she said flatly. Elijah remained still. She closed the door behind him. You've bypassed every rule, rewritten every assigned piece, and defied my authority in front of the entire school. He raised an eyebrow. I thought I followed the curriculum, I just elevated it. Her eyes narrowed. You're clever, but you're also arrogant. No, Elijah said firmly. I'm tired of being underestimated. A silence stretched between them. I didn't mock you at the beginning, Elijah, she said finally. I tested you. That's what this school does. He looked her straight in the eye. You tried to humiliate me. And when I didn't fold, you moved the goalposts. You're making this personal. It is personal. His voice dropped. You looked at me and assumed I was a problem to fix. But I'm not broken. You just weren't ready for my kind of excellence. She stood there, mouth slightly open, stunned into silence. He left without waiting for her to respond. And this time, the door didn't close behind him quietly. It slammed. Keys and consequences. The days leading up to the winter recital passed in a flurry of rehearsal, media visits, and tension. Elijah had become something of a legend on campus. He didn't walk through Westbridge's halls anymore. He glided. But even as admiration grew, so did pressure. He could feel eyes on him everywhere. Hey, superstar, Nia whispered one morning as they sat outside before class. How does it feel knowing the whole school is holding its breath for your finale? Elijah smiled tightly. Like I'm carrying a piano on my back. She leaned in, nudging him. You've done the impossible already. Just make it music. That day, he rehearsed harder than ever, fine-tuning every bar of his composition. The practice room had become his temple. The Steinway responded like it knew him personally. Yet, no matter how perfectly he played, he still felt the weight of something unresolved. Miss Denholm's presence haunted every note. Later that afternoon, a firestorm erupted. Westbridge's anonymous student blog published a post titled, Rising Star or Problem Child. The Elijah Brooks Controversy. The article claimed Elijah had received special treatment, rewrote assigned pieces at will, and undermined long-standing faculty traditions. It accused him of being entitled and suggested he used race as a shield for poor discipline. Elijah read the words, stunned. His chest tightened. He hadn't realized how much resentment was brewing behind the applause. The worst part? The article quoted an anonymous senior faculty member. Nia slammed her laptop shut in anger. She did this, she hissed. Denholm leaked it. I'd bet everything. Elijah shook his head slowly. She didn't need to. She already planted the idea. Someone else just wrote it. By that evening, the entire school had seen the post. Rumors churned in the halls. Some defended him. Others kept their distance. Mr. Latimer called an emergency meeting with Elijah in his office. I'm sorry this is happening, he said grimly. The article is being investigated. But I won't lie, it's made some board members nervous. One even asked if we should replace your spot with something less divisive. Elijah stared at him. You're not pulling me from the recital, are you? No, Latimer said, firm. Not unless you decide to walk away. Elijah clenched his fists. I'm not running. Latimer nodded. Then play louder. The day before the recital, Elijah stayed after school, alone in the auditorium. He needed silence, clarity. He sat at the piano, not to rehearse, but to think. He whispered to the keys, "Why do they hate it when I don't stay small?" The echo answered with silence. He played the first few notes. Then again, softer. The music had changed. So had he. The pain was in the melody now, the fight in the rhythm, the resistance in every measure. The next morning, Elijah stepped onto campus in his crisp black suit. His mother walked beside him, dressed in warm gold and grace. Her hands trembled slightly. You okay, Mom? She looked at him, eyes glistening. When I dropped you off here that first day, I prayed they'd see what I see. But they still don't. They see what they want to see. He took her hand. Tonight, they'll hear it instead. She kissed his cheek. Backstage before the show, the nerves hit. Nia appeared beside him, dressed in a soft blue dress with piano key earrings. I have a confession, she whispered. I sent your recital clip to someone. He blinked. Who? She smiled. The New York Times youth arts editor. They want to interview you, after your performance tonight. He froze. Wait, what? Play first, she said, smirking. Freak out later. On stage, one act after another performed beautifully. Applause followed each. But the atmosphere changed when the MC finally said, and now, for tonight's headlining performance, Elijah Brooks. The lights dimmed. The piano gleamed like obsidian under the stage lights. He stepped into view. Silence fell. He sat, took a breath, and began. He started not with the classical motif, but with a single, quiet jazz chord. The melody that followed was different. He had rewritten the entire first third the night before. Now it was sharper, bolder. The transitions were still elegant, but charged. A collision of classical and blues. A testimony, not a performance. The crowd didn't know the full story, but they felt it. At the climax, Elijah struck the final chord, a long, resonant sound full of grit, defiance, and soul. And then, silence. Complete stillness. Then it broke. The applause came like a wave, then a roar. People stood, some wiping tears. Latimer clapped hard from the front row. Even a few board members rose. Miss Denholm did not, but she looked down and closed her notebook. A teacher's silence, a student's voice. Elijah stood in the spotlight for a moment longer, letting the applause wash over him, not as a boast, but as a balm. For the first time, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. He bowed, nodded once, and exited stage left. Backstage, Nia was waiting with her arms outstretched, grinning like her face might split. You did it, she breathed. You seriously did it. I changed the intro last night, he murmured, still breathless. I know. We could feel it. It was personal. Raw. Elijah's mother reached him seconds later and hugged him tightly, her eyes wet. You told your story without saying a word. That's the loudest truth of all. As others passed by offering congratulations, handshakes, and stunned smiles, Miss Denholm was nowhere to be seen. The following Monday, the school halls were alive with whispers and praise. Students Elijah didn't even know greeted him with nods of respect. A few younger students even asked if he'd tutor them in piano. But in room 104, Miss Denholm's classroom was unusually quiet. She entered without a greeting, went straight to the board, and began a lesson on scale modulation. Her tone was flat, her instructions mechanical. It was like the performance had never happened, until the final minute of class. Elijah, she said without turning around. Stay a moment. The room thinned quickly. Nia paused at the door, her face tense. Elijah nodded, telling her silently, "It's okay." He remained seated as Miss Denholm erased the board with slow, deliberate strokes. When she finally turned to face him, her expression was unreadable. "You performed a powerful piece," she said stiffly. "Thank you." She paused. "You restructured it without approval." "I did. It wasn't what was assigned. Number. But it was what was needed." She nodded slowly. "You broke every rule, but I couldn't deny its impact." He watched her carefully. "I underestimated you, Elijah," she finally admitted. "Not your ability, your determination." There was a silence between them that didn't feel hostile, just hollow. She continued, "I've spent decades teaching this program to perfection, maybe too much perfection. I don't apologize for high standards. But I recognize now, standards without inclusion are just walls." Elijah blinked, surprised. Miss Denholm set her chalk down. "You deserved a teacher, not a gatekeeper." He stood. "I didn't need your approval. I just needed you not to stand in my way." Her jaw twitched. "You made that clear. And you've made history here. I'll file your Juilliard recommendation this afternoon." He didn't thank her, but he nodded and walked out. Finally, without the weight of her gaze shadowing his back. A week later, the New York Times feature came out. "The Sound of Resistance, Elijah Brooks, and the Keys That Spoke Volumes." It chronicled not only his performance, but his battle against quiet racism in elite spaces. The article included quotes from classmates, Mr. Latimer, and even Naya. Miss Denholm declined to comment. The story trended for days. Suddenly, Elijah's inbox filled with invites, from music programs, university scouts, non-profit composers, even a producer from a major music label. But he stayed grounded. He wasn't done writing a song. At the next school assembly, Mr. Latimer presented Elijah with the Westbridge Visionary Arts Award, a medal that hadn't been handed out in 7 years. The crowd rose as Elijah accepted it. When he stepped up to the mic, he didn't talk about his struggles, or the article, or Miss Denholm. He said, "I want to dedicate this award to every kid who's been told to sit down when they had something to play. Don't ask permission to be brilliant." And he stepped away. The auditorium roared. That night, back home, Elijah played quietly in his room. No cameras, no audience, just him. He played not to prove anything, not to fight, not to resist, but to breathe. Music wasn't his armor anymore. It was his skin, beyond the keys. Spring arrived with a quiet confidence at Westbridge Conservatory. The snow had melted into soft puddles. Crocuses pushed through the soil near the courtyard fountain, and Elijah Brooks, once whispered about in hallways, now walked like someone who'd found his place. But he never forgot how he'd earned it. His Juilliard Youth Program acceptance letter came on a Friday. He opened it in the living room with his mom beside him. The envelope had a gold seal, the letter folded crisply inside. His hands trembled. "Dear Mr. Brooks, we are pleased to inform you." His mother gasped. Tears flowed instantly. "You did it, baby," she whispered, gripping him tightly. Elijah couldn't speak. He just laughed through the lump in his throat, hugging her like he was still that little boy tapping melodies on the kitchen table with plastic spoons. The school threw a reception in his honor. News cameras returned. The district superintendent shook his hand. Westbridge updated its website with his picture. Student spotlight, Elijah Brooks, Juilliard-bound composer. Miss Denholm attended the ceremony. She didn't speak much, but she did approach him near the punch table. "I meant what I said," she told him. "You've pushed me to reflect more than any student I've taught." Elijah simply nodded. "I hope the next kid who walks in like me doesn't have to push as hard." She looked away for a moment, then back. "Neither do I." The night before he left for New York, Elijah sat on his porch with Nia. "You scared?" she asked, her feet swinging off the edge. "A little," he admitted. "It's Juilliard, the real deal." "Good. You should be a little scared. That means you care." She handed him a small journal. "What's this?" "For your compositions. Fill it with all the pieces you haven't written yet." The ones the world still needs to hear. He smiled and pocketed it. Promise me something, she added. Anything. Don't let them box your music, or your voice, ever again. He looked up at the stars. Never. The next morning, his mother hugged him for so long he almost missed his train. You go be great, she whispered fiercely. But come home, okay? This world's gonna try to shape you, but don't you ever let them file down your edges. I won't, Mom. You hear me? I hear you. On the train, Elijah pulled out his headphones, but didn't press play. He stared out at the rolling countryside. In his lap sat his notebook. Blank. But not empty. The stories inside him hadn't all been told. The boy who'd been mocked and challenged and tested in a room built to keep him small was now heading to one of the most celebrated musical institutions in the world. He didn't just survive Westbridge. He changed it. That summer, Westbridge updated its music curriculum to include contemporary composers from underrepresented backgrounds. They renamed Practice Room 3 after Elijah. It became known as the Brooks Room, where sound speaks truth. Epilogue. Note: the boy they once forced to play for their amusement played them all into silence, and then he rewrote the song.